Well, thanks. I think I'm labeled a skeptic in the world of robotics, so that's why I was asked to talk. Oops. I do have one disclosure, some legal consulting work I do that's indirect for Medtronic that is not regarding robotics and has no relevance to this talk. So I was actually an early adopter of the robot. Back when I finished my fellowship in 2005, I did about 70 cases on the original platform. It took us longer, cost more, it had no benefit to the patient, and we actually gave up doing robotics clinically in general surgery at about that time. However, I continued to work on the robot and in the research lab. Because of my skepticism, I've been asked over the years to give a number of talks about how you don't need a robot and it's okay to be a skeptic. So up until 2018, I was definitely sort of the anti-robot guy. However, my current practice, I've now migrated about 40% of my practice to the robot. I still do about 40% lap and about 20% open, which is my complex ab wall case volume. I think you can show one-off cases where you might argue your cases are lower, but there's really no argument in the literature that robotics is more expensive. This is from the National Inpatient Sample of over 91,000 operations, and you can see here that adding robotics compared to laparoscopy increases cost by about 20% overall. That really ranges from 6% in hysterectomy up to 25% in colectomy. And you can make an argument about your own personal case volume or your own personal experience, but these are really good national numbers. It's also important to note that this does not include the cost of the robot platform itself and the amortization of that $2 million per robot cost to the hospital. We could spend all day going through individual paper after paper showing basically every procedure across the board. Cholecystectomy, hernia, inguinal hernia, costs are higher on the robot, and operative times are higher on the robot. Just to summarize all that data, when you look at robot versus laparoscopic surgery, there really is no question, and I'm sure people might argue with me, but really no question in the literature that robotics increases time and costs compared to laparoscopy. Now, you can make an argument that robotics saves money and saves cost over open surgery, mostly due to decreasing length of stay. So where the robot facilitates transition from open to MIS, I think you can make a cost effectiveness argument. Despite that increased cost, we've seen a tremendous rise in robotic surgery. This is a paper from 2018 showing over 6 years an 8-fold increase in robotic surgery nationally, just within general surgery. And a large proportion of that driven by hernia, so over a 40-fold increase in inguinal and ventral hernia repairs using the robotic platform. I mentioned that you could make an argument about using the robot as a means to transition from open to MIS, but in fact, the data suggests that a lot of the robotic growth is really cannibalizing from laparoscopy. This is from the same study out of Michigan showing that open surgery was declining and laparoscopic surgery was increasing, and then when a hospital adopts the robot, both open and laparoscopic continue to show a mild decrease while robotic surgery increases dramatically. So laparoscopy is actually declining and robotics is increasing. So it's not really just that open to MIS transition. It's really cannibalizing existing practice. Because of that, the market for robotics is huge, and Dr. Horgan's going to be talking a little bit about future robotics platform, but there's some estimates that this is a $10.3 billion market in the US in the next 10 years. That money has to come from somewhere. That money has to come from clinical revenues, has to come from hospital and system revenues. So there is a real cost to robotics from a system standpoint. So given that the robotic platforms are more expensive and the cases are more expensive, how can we make it more cost effective in a world where robotics is increasing in prevalence? There's a lot of interesting work being done on this. This is just a nice way to look at it from a modeling system where they put in a lot of data, OR charges, length of stay, conversion rates, et cetera. And if you take the current state, robotics is more expensive both from a system and from a societal perspective. However, because you can model this, you can then model the impacts of various changes to the inputs to the model. So for example, you can model what happens if you can lower costs just a little bit, or if you can change your disposable cost or your conversion rate. So what they found, ways to make robotics more cost-effective than lap, you have to decrease your OR time. Again, almost every study out there shows that robotic surgery takes longer than the equivalent laparoscopic technique. So decreasing OR time by about 20 to 30 minutes, this is in colons, decreasing your robotic instrument cost by about $1,300 a case. So do you really need 4 instruments when 3 instruments might do? Or if you can change your conversion or your hernia rates to lower those can all be ways to drive the cost down and cost effectiveness up. This is from the Providence healthcare system, multiple hospitals, almost 50 surgeons, almost 1,000 cases. And it just shows the importance of volume in building a program. High volume robotic surgeons defined as doing more than 30 cases a year, you can see that their times go down, their conversion rates go down, all of those things that based on the model you would expect to impact cost effectiveness. And in fact, you can see that their costs are about $5,000 lower in the high volume surgeons. So it really gets to be this idea of if you're going to be cost conscious, you have to really be systematic about it and build a program that looks at things like instrumentation, OR efficiency, staff training. In my own system, our biggest barrier is actually the staff. Room turnover times, wheels in to wheels out, not just console time is what really matters. So that staff training and support is really critical. The other big thing is I want to take a step back and say the cost is not all that matters, and really, for me, value is what matters. And value, we often talk about value to the hospital or the cost to the hospital, but what about the value to the surgeon? And not all value is measured in economics. And I was glad to see Dr. Hassan mention this, I think talking about building a program, but also ergonomics. So I too developed tennis elbow from laparoscopic surgery. I've had multiple times to take a month to 6 weeks off of operating because of my elbow. And that is actually what drove me to adopt the robot. Surgeons are manual laborers. It's physically arduous work. OSHA would have a fit if they ever walked into one of our operating rooms. We focus on the patients and not ourselves. Up to 80%, 90% of surgeons have had pain within the last week, and 40% of surgeons are currently in pain. That has tremendous impacts on productivity, quality, and shortened careers. Laparoscopy is worse than open surgery, and I've heard laparoscopy described as a means of transferring the patient's pain to the surgeon. Interestingly, the only randomized controlled trial I've seen on this, the RIVAL study, this was the RIVAL study, showed no difference in overall ergonomic strain between lap and robotics. However, where the strain is felt is different. So you have more wrist pain and more eye and neck strain, but less back, shoulder, and elbow pain. Given that my issues are in my elbow, I found that actually mixing it up and doing some robot, some lap, and some open actually helps me. And that's why I continue to do my lap foregut cases and my robot abdominal wall cases. It allows me to mix it up. I do want to throw out a plug for the Society of Surgical Ergonomics. This is a new surgical society that has just been founded. You're all welcome to join. And we're actually having our first virtual symposium in the fall. There'll be a call for abstracts pretty soon. So in summary, I do think robotics is here to stay. I think we have to be realistic and admit that it's an increase in costs, both the amortization of the robot and the equipment cost, and therefore the mitigation techniques have to be critical. We have to do training, we have to talk about OR time and efficiency, about optimization, and looking at your own personal data in your own hospital requires working with hospital administration to actually get that data. Turns out often getting that data is like pulling teeth, but it's worth it. But I also want to point out it is not just about the cost. And you can use robotics to build a program. In my own case, it allowed us to transition from robotic inguinals to robotic ETEP incisional hernia repairs. I couldn't do a robotic ETEP incisional hernia repair if I hadn't done a couple hundred robotic inguinal hernias first. So that building a program is important. And then you also have to consider not just the economic cost, but also the surgeon value in terms of ergonomics and career satisfaction. Thank you.